Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Something Something podcast. My name is Eric Kasloff, and with me, as always, is Larry Sands. Say hello, Larry.
Hello, Larry.
Well, Larry, usually we do an update about where our lives are going and projects we're working on.
Right.
Well, I'm
Right.
going to get right into my story that
I don't
happened
know, man, if you
yesterday.
should. Go ahead.
And then we're going to get right into our guest. Because from what
Okay.
we've talked to him, I think he'll dig this story too.
Okay. All right. I hope so.
He has a good sense of humor. So, 2 days ago, I noticed that the plumbing in my
Okay.
restroom.
Wait. You should actually. Maybe we should give a disclaimer. No, never mind. Just go.
So, the plumbing in my restroom was acting up. There was like weird noises happening.
Like gurgles.
Yeah. Now I'll admit I live with my mom.
Uh-huh.
So I wake up yesterday morning and my entire bathtub was filled with feces. And the toilet too. So we call our landlord immediately and they send the plumber over. Now there's like a gaps between everything. The plumber gets here, opens the door, looks in the bathroom, walks out and goes, "I cannot fix that." So we're thinking, okay, we've got to move. We have to move now.
Right.
But they called someone and they fixed it. But man, that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I mean, the whole bathtub.
That's one of the things where you and I we talked earlier, and I almost halfway knowing you and people that listen to this podcast, knowing you're into horror and everything, and since it's Halloween or around there when we're doing this, I halfway expected you to say, so everything was backed up, and then when we plunged it, a head came out of the pipe or some kind of body part.
Now, you see, I live in Jersey where there's a lot of people in the sanitation business. So I wouldn't be shocked if there was like.
I noticed you
parts.
just did air quotes, right?
Yeah.
Sanitation air quotes.
All right. Well, I see that our guest hasn't signed off yet. So
Yes,
you want to segue into him?
Yes. Well, I don't know how to segue that from that story to our guest. I would just let's just go ahead and get right into it. With today, we actually, and Eric, you know this, I love music, right?
Yes.
I love music, and I did music for a while in my previous life, I guess. No, my past life.
It's kind of connecting to a former guest of the show also.
It is. Well, so today we have with us, his name is Frank Kirkpatrick. Frank, are you there?
How's it going, Frank? Thanks for
Hi
coming.
there. Hi, guys.
How are you?
Hard to come back on a shitty story like that.
But that's right. Exactly. Well, to start off, now you're really big into music. You're a songwriter. You're a musician. You're a producer.
Guilty as charged.
I'm sorry?
Guilty as charged.
Awesome.
What came first?
Well, I'd say the thing that came first was a whole lot of other stuff, because this is a new chapter in my life. I used to work in the advertising business and work a lot with words, and saw how words could be persuasive. And I started a new chapter a couple of years ago and thought I would incorporate some social value with music and entertain people enough to get them to listen, and then deliver a little social message alongside.
That's very cool. Very cool.
Commendable.
How do you, and this is weird in a way, I guess, but as an advertising person, is there a big difference between advertising and being a songwriter?
Well, yes and no. Obviously, in advertising, you have to catch people's attention and give them something that they're interested in that gives them enough entertainment to pay attention. The constraint is that, and I guess it's a little true no matter what form, whether you're making a film or a television commercial or writing a book, you have to follow a format to a degree because it's what people expect. In music, as you, I'm sure, know from other guests you've had on your show, there's a standard format of typically verse, chorus, bridge, and then maybe you're done. And so you ignore that at your peril, and because people expect to hear that. At the same time, deliberately moving away from a standard structure can be good.
Very much so. So what kind of music do you listen to now, and what were like your inspirations when you were like a kid and all of that?
Well, I'm still a kid, but the
You know what I mean.
inspirations are really all over the place. And the advice I always get is if you're going to be successful in the music business, you better have a clearly defined narrow niche. And of course, that's the first rule I violated. I'm in 3 or 4 different niches. One of the starting points for me is I've always liked harmony. Current day sound, I just love pentatonics. I met their producer, Ben Bram, who won a Grammy with them a few months back. And I just love that kind of sound. You take that back a few decades and it was Brian Wilson, it was the Beach Boys, and they had this natural advantage of being all family members, and they produced these beautiful blends. So at one end, some of the stuff I do is real happy music. It's summery music, but of course, being a few years past high school, we no longer go to the beach and look at the girls and drive the cars, but we reflect a bit more on what we've been through in our life. And in fact, I wrote a song called Take Me Back in Time, which raises the question of, would I go back in time if I could?
Ooh, good question. Would you?
Would you want to? Would it be the same, or is it all kind of glossed over? And then on the other end, I'm interested in some pretty dark stuff too. We did a song called Agony Flows. It's about people that have been in a pretty dark place and experienced not much hope for tomorrow. Unfortunately, that hasn't been my experience, but I've certainly known people about who that was true. And so I kind of worked to bring their experience into my song. And then I've got other, as I say, another genre where I'm interested in very esoteric, let's call it meditative types of material. In fact, we're doing an audio-visual program called Gratitude that's going to be out on both YouTube and also on Alexa, the little device. That's the one. You heard it there.
I think if mine probably heard it too.
Is not supported on this device.
That's awesome.
Instead.
When I said Alexa, my Alexa got a little excited there.
That's right.
Here in the
She's
background.
ready to go.
It's ready to go. So Gratitude is going to be a audio and video program that it's free. We're not selling it, but something that people can use to kind of energize their morning. We're going to do a sort of an opposite version so they can relax at night, get some sleep, get some good rest. And we're working on that right now with a fellow who's actually, he's a specialist for you music nerds out there. You'll know what this is. It's in the microtonal area of arrangement, which is just taking a little bit sharper, flat from the usual notes, and somehow the brain just gets so engaged by it. So we're working with a fellow named Alex Wand, who last year won a Grammy for his work in microtonal arrangement as we put together the Gratitude series. So that's in development. We hope to be out online in the next couple of months with that.
That is.
Oh, and I forgot one more thing. I forgot crush songs. So if I were an 18-year-old girl, what would I be worried about? I'd be worried about, should I call him back? So we wrote a song called Call or Hold the Phone. We wrote a song called Please Don't Seduce Me, when the objective is maybe just the opposite. So as I say, I get these ideas from sometimes, as I say, my own reading about people, thinking what it was like for me to be an 18-year-old girl, and sometimes from friends. So as I say, I'm interested in topics all over the place. I'm so fortunate to have as a wonderful collaborator, a woman I work with on almost all the songs I do. Her name is Reiko.
Yes.
And
a former guest of the show, wonderful artist.
Well,
Yes.
you see, you keep right on going. So you're on a winning streak.
Yeah, that's right.
She is, for those who didn't hear her on your show, you might want to actually tune back into that because it's
link in the description.
What's that now?
I'll put the link in the description.
Oh, that's a great idea. Well, we complemented each other a lot. She's a Japanese, born in Japan. She has this wonderful ability to just hear music in her head. She doesn't read music, but that doesn't matter. We can certainly get it down on paper. She produces as well and sings and has her own band called Lolita Dark. And so we've worked together, as I say, for a couple of years, and in all these different genres, pulled together some pretty magic stuff, including some with, as I was starting to say earlier, kind of a social commentary component, including our songs Gender Genocide that supports the Me Too movement, and also one called Yellow Fever that's about guys who are obsessed, white guys who are obsessed with Asian women.
Now, when she was on the show, I asked her this. A few years ago, there was that. I usually don't like to put down other artists. There was a band that put out a song called Asian Girls, which was very awful, very demeaning, and just nasty. Was that song a response to that band's song?
Well, I would say that was true, except it's not. It's essentially, I don't know that song. I'll look it up later.
I'll send you the link.
Oh, yeah.
You got it on your player there.
Oh no, okay.
Okay.
No, I'll send you the link after the show. I was making sure my phone was off. I didn't want to disturb anybody.
So no, it wasn't. It was not. It was really. Reiko and I discussed just that whole theme, and was timed. I see that song Asian Girls with a Z was by a group called Day Above Ground.
Oh yeah, it's so offensive.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the lyrics here, and I'd have to agree. In any case, this is a lot more nuanced. It's about, as I was saying, guys who are just a little too interested in Asian girls in a really objectifying way. And it's interesting where it came from. I have a friend who's Japanese. Her name is Ashley Miyazaki. And one night we were just shooting the breeze, and she was telling me about yellow fever, and I really didn't know a thing about it. And she wasn't really bitter, but she certainly informed me that it was a real thing. And then Reiko and I talked about it, and we turned it into a song that is, ironically, it's not just, it really comes full circle, because it's not just guys about girls. Sometimes it works in the opposite direction. So that was our, as I say, our little movement towards identifying an issue for people to consider. I guess I put it that way.
Well, and as you write songs, especially songs that speak to what's going on today, is there a right way, or do you worry about what people will think when they listen to it? As far as, well, I guess, I don't know, man, because everybody takes offense at so much. Do you? Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is how bad or how often do you edit yourself and go, no, that's too deep, that's gonna piss people off too much, or you go, no, let's do that, let's piss people off in a good way.
In a good way. I can't say that I'm writing to be intentionally, well, provocative, yes, offensive, no.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'll tell you the funny story about yellow fever. I went through, that's actually how I met Reiko a couple of years ago when we did that. I went through 3 or 4 other women who had the range and had the style who wouldn't do the song. And so I guess I felt I was onto something. And as I say, if listeners listen to the words carefully, it's not, the title is a little provocative, but in the content, it really does tell a story in both directions. Mm-hmm. So it's out here on the West Coast, we have a fast food place called Yellow Fever now, and they've gotten a little bit of the same pushback from the world.
Wait,
so
really?
Something to be said for getting attention, but you don't want to do it at the risk of your own integrity or looking like a jerk.
Wow, it's actually, I left LA 4 years ago to move back to Jersey. There really is a place called Yellow Fever?
Well, I don't know, where did you live when you were here?
I lived in Melrose.
Okay, well, it's in Venice. It's on Lincoln Boulevard. In fact, there are 2 or 3 of them. There's one in Long Beach that just opened, and they're opening one inside Whole Foods. And it was, as I say, it's pretty provocative. In fact, it was covered by the New York Times a couple months ago. And so we're going to, I guess we'll see if that's a good controversy or not so good controversy. The interesting thing from what I've observed is it's not so much Asian people that are concerned about that theme, but it's people who think they're standing up for them. I'm obviously not in that ethnic background, but as I say, if people kind of take a moment listening to the words of the song, it really does tell the story that is not just hot, but enlightening.
Well, yeah, when it comes to art, like if you would have put, hey, this song is about, if the title would have been, this song is about, the two ways of looking at this issue, nobody would have listened. But you call a song Yellow Fever, people who know the term, they're like, hey, what the hell is this about? And they're going to want to listen.
Right.
Well, that's right. And again, you're going to catch, some people didn't know what it meant at all. And I guess I was probably in that category. And then some people knew it, but not so well. And some people, for example, my friend, weren't too pushed off by it, but we're kind of used to it, I guess you'd say. Mm. So you can't, going back to the notion of trying to deliver some social value, you really can't do that if you can't lecture people. You might be able to engage people if you can tell them a story and they can connect, and one of the lines in the song is, I can say I was doing it too. So that's how we connect. Yeah. On everything, not just that song.
And that's one of the important things too, I think. And obviously, music really connects people. In a heavy way. Well, some of it is really poppy or whatever, country, jazz, all that stuff. But really it's like the lifeblood of everybody, because we all have a rhythm inside of us. And if we listen to that rhythm, I think it just draws us all together. Talk a little bit about, since we're a little talking about the social side of things, talk a little bit about Stay Alive, the suicide prevention music video series.
Sure. So that came out of a conversation with a fellow that I know who's a psychiatrist named Mark Goulston. And he was, I think, 20 years at UCLA, 25 years. He retired recently. And he's, as I say, a psychiatrist by training, and had the very notable accolade that specializing in suicide, in 20 years, he never lost a patient. And so if you look him up on Medium, if you look him up online, he has just wonderful guidance for people in a challenging place of despair. And a lot of his message is about finding purpose and repairing, as he calls it, repairing and repairing with your purpose. And so that's, he and I had talked about that at a couple points. In any case, he and I and Reiko met, and she brought to, again, everyone's attention that the anime community has a much higher prevalence of despair, depression, and suicide, because people join the anime community or cosplay because they're outsiders. They want people they connect with. They want to feel a little less alone. Notwithstanding, that is still a part of that experience. So in any case, Reiko and I wrote a song called Stay Alive that is aimed at focusing on not happy talk, because that'll get you nowhere, but really engaging with people who are in a tough spot. And if that, at the risk of being a little too simplistic, that is really one of the key elements. If there are people out there that are in a tough spot or know people who are, it's really finding a way to connect and say, I understand, and I will be with you in your pain. And not the message of it'll be better tomorrow, or look, all you have to live for, some other nonsense. That's trivializing, and people don't benefit from it. But if you can deliver the message that you're there with them, that's powerful. So that was the kernel of the song. And then from there, Mark, Reiko, and I decided we wanted to do a video podcast on this topic. and we wanted to get it out, particularly to the anime community. Maybe some others in the future, but we're going to start there. So from there, Mark, knowing folks in that situation, connected with his friend by the name of Kevin Hines. And Kevin Hines was one of the 2% of people who had jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and lived.
Yeah, I read about that in your notes.
Yeah, his is a fantastic story. You can go to the Kevin Hines story, read about Kevin, and you'll see what a brave guy he is. Just challenged, grew up in a tough environment, was adopted by very nice parents. And I guess that's one of the things too, is that his life just didn't turn magical when he got living in a nice suburban home. He still had challenges. He was diagnosed as bipolar. And so I guess that goes to, it won't go away just if you're, it won't go away that easily. So at the age of 19, he took a bus to the Golden Gate Bridge, took a leap off, and miraculously lived. And in the subsequent 10 or whatever years it's been, has come back, although I would say it's not been easy, because he's still being diagnosed as a person with a serious mental illness, has to take medication and has been hospitalized and certainly had physical injuries from the fall. So Kevin's going to come on the video and interact with Mark and talk about what his path was like, and perhaps offer some understanding, as I was saying a moment ago, to those who might be in a dark place and might appreciate having recognition of someone else who has been as well. And by the way, Reiko is going to introduce the series in a special little segment that has a kind of a special message to the anime community, because she's from there. Her band has played with the anime community for a lot of years, and with these two white guys on there, perhaps it'll make the message a little more understood to have somebody introduce it who's actually from there.
Have you guys thought about talking to the people at Crunchyroll and Funimation about getting the show onto those platforms?
Well, I will now. Crunchyroll and animation. What was the second one?
Crunchyroll and Funimation, they're like streaming services that are especially for anime, and they're very deep into the anime community. Like, you go to a convention, they've got booths all over. So you might want to talk to them, because I think that'll be right up their alley, because it's
that's an excellent idea. Thank you. We do have, through Reiko, we have a lot of connections with anime expos, anime conventions, but we certainly want to deliver to more and more people. It's obviously a lot of these are volunteer groups. As some people who are younger who are listening into your show may not know, anime wasn't really a thing in the U.S. until the 80s.
Yeah. With Akira and the Miyazaki stuff that started coming in is what the gateway was for a lot of people.
So all of which is to say that we'd like to access more distribution. These groups that are there are well-intentioned volunteer groups, but they're not, they don't have professional marketing people. So they might send out notice of the video to folks that would have interest, but we'd like to have more and more opportunity to explore. It's interesting. I have a friend who's a lecturer at Harvard Medical School, and he's a psychiatrist, and he's going to distribute the kind of coming at from the other end, from the standpoint of clinicians. He's going to bring this video to those who work with adolescents. And as I say, they're not all necessarily Asian or Japanese. They're very multicultural. And so I jotted those down. Thank you for that great suggestion.
I'll email you their stuff also after the show, so you can try to get a hold of them.
That's just great. As I say, I'm interested if you hear of other opportunities as well. The more the better.
Well, before I let Larry talk, you just go to Google, type in YouTube anime reviews. There's like a huge, so I'm very, very into anime. I've bored Larry for countless hours on end explaining the importance of Death Note. So you can find like the top people there, like email them and just be like,
Right.
hey, we got this show coming up that could help your fans.
Guys, I was just looking at my computer. We took a break there, and I got to tell you, there's a million terrible songs about the Asian community by a whole bunch of rappers. My God, here's a list of 22, and it's just degrading. You asked earlier if we'd written this in response to that, and I guess maybe you could think that we
Now
did.
you have.
I wish we had, but actually, I'm glad we didn't know all those songs because they're just so narrow and objectifying. So, and some of them are a little cute, like 2% cute, 98% shit. But there's a lot of them out there. So I see here one by Childish Gambino that's maybe not too bad, but a lot of them.
He's very socially conscious.
Yeah, he's more nuanced about it.
Yeah.
But
so I'm sure his isn't like that at all.
No. So as I say, I'm glad that we're on the right side of that because it's just got to be tough. I'll tell you, it goes back to our other song, Gender Genocide. Being a woman's tough. You have to think where you're going and what you're doing, and you can't just go out in the street like guys do. And so I don't really think that it's necessary to pile on to that topic because it's just it's not the right thing.
I have a daughter, and I've tried very hard. Well, I should say I've seen how vicious girls. And this isn't like like when she was in high school, and they can be vicious. Girls are mean, and to pile it on top of the way guys think about girls. I mean, I was a teenager, obviously, and I know how it is. And I can't really do anything about it. But what I can do is, as a parent, be very, very understanding and try to take the time to listen to her and what she has to say about everything. And I don't discount anything she says, and it's very, very hard to be a girl. Girls are vicious. They're so vicious. But that's one of the good things about being a musician or being a writer or being, I guess, a creative person that can look at the world almost as it affects you, but look at it objectively enough to put it down into a simplified way to where everybody can see what's going on. Does that make any sense at all?
Well, I think it's absolutely the right path, and it's something that's not talked about very much. And maybe your message here will get to, if nothing else, provide a little recognition that it's a challenge for a lot of people out there on a day-to-day basis. And so we should hope for more folks like yourself who are sensitive and offer their friends, their daughters, their families support.
Yes.
I think the main reason why stuff like the Me Too movement is happening because guys like us who are willing to stand up for the women in their lives aren't doing enough. Right.
Well, it's kind of hard baked into the culture. If you look 100 years ago, I mean, things, or 100 years ago, try 20 years ago, it's just part of the landscape, how things took place. And it's just, it's a new world, and it's a time for a new perspective.
Which, and actually, we were talking about this so like it almost amazes me, and people listen to this, they might get pissed off or whatever, but we talked when this Harvey Weinstein stuff was going on, and it almost surprised people that it's been going on for so long. But I mean, I'm an actor. I was an actor, and I mean, 10, 15 years ago, it hasn't. It's not like it just popped up and it started happening. And the way that the thing that gets me is the way that people are now, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was happening. Lies, all lies. It's just it amazes me to no end, and it's a little offensive actually. And I don't get offended easily, but you know, I mean, and not just girls. You know, it happens to men too, and you know, I mean, it goes either way. But
It can go either way, and it's harsh in both cases because you feel objectified and powerless, and that's really the core of it. Is that that sticks with you? So it's nothing. It's not silly. It's not funny. And as I say, I'm distressed to see the way that certain parts of the musical community treat it, because it doesn't advance things, and that's what music is supposed to do.
Yeah, you know, and I get it. You know, music, it's been around a while, and you know, artists are artists, whether they're out there or in there or close to the vest, and you know, it's a reflection of, you know, how we grew up and everything else and the way we want to see pretty roses. But I think when you're striving to be socially conscious, I think that puts you in a whole new perspective of the way things are done. And so I just say congratulations and thank you for having the balls to do something like that, by the way, because, you know, and you touched on, you know, the suicide.
Yes.
We
And
had
that linked, of course, if people feel powerless and worthless, they're much more at risk for that. So
yeah, and see, that's the thing. It's like we had a guest on not too long ago. He actually wrote a book about suicide. His fiance had committed suicide.
oh,
And
by the way, I learned this. I don't know if your listeners would be interested, but the preferred expression is not committed suicide, because that sounds like a crime, but it's life taken by suicide, because it de-stigmatizes it a bit.
See, I didn't know they had changed that was the proper way to say it.
Well, I just learned this from Kevin, so
okay.
That's why I'm sharing it.
Thank you. You know, and the big thing is he's been through a lot, and he was very open and honest with his feelings and how he deals with things. And this is a very real thing, and it's very heavy. And I think, you know, it's like he said, and you'd have more light on this than anybody, is you have to take things day by day, and it's okay. He said it was okay to have the bad days and to talk yourself.
It's all right to not be all right.
That's right. That's right. And it's just when you were talking, it just reminded me of life is so fragile. It's so fragile. And I think I could be wrong, but I think we all have a responsibility to look upon each other and to be more caring than we are, because everybody out there is hurting. We just actually had a guest on last week, and she went from being homeless to a doctor, and she wrote a book. And I it just feels like everybody we've talked to, everybody is so connected. And it goes back to, you know, just noticing people, talking to people, engaging people in a way where you just acknowledge them every day in a positive way, instead of just like turning around and going the other way. I don't know. Is any of this making sense?
Well, I think it makes sense to me, of course, but I'm hoping it's going to resonate to some of your listeners, because, as you say, music can be very powerful. So why don't we use it for good? It's a cheap shot just to go out there and joke on people who are weaker than we are. So let's be the best people we can.
Here.
And
I
yeah, it's
absolutely
much
agree.
easier. I think we talked with Riku about this, how it's much harder to say something nice to someone than it is to say something mean and hateful.
Well, it takes more effort. You're more exposed. It's easier to make a joke out of whatever you see, whether the person's heavy, old, young. It's just it's a cheaper way to do it. So
Mm.
let's take a little extra effort. Is I think what you're saying and that's why people don't bother sometimes.
Yeah, with me, I have neurofibromatosis and have had leg problems my whole life. I used to have to wear a lift on my shoe to help me
Mhm.
walk right, and I was mercilessly picked on by kids, and it affected me in a lot of ways. And then in positive ways also, I was able to take all that negativity that was thrown at me, and it's made me who I am today. Well, whether that's a good thing or bad thing.
Sounds pretty good so far.
It's a good thing.
It's a
Yeah,
good thing.
that's why I make violent horror movies, because
You know? It's a way. It's a lot less a toxic way to express that than 100 other things.
So as we're getting ready to close, what advice would you give to like young people out there in our audience who want to get into music? Like just flat out, what advice would you give?
Well, my thought is to just, as I said at the top of the broadcast, go from what you feel and what you know. It may. I'm not a household name yet. Reiko's not, but we're working at it, and I have a lot of faith that we'll make an impact for some people. So I would suggest coming from your heart and doing what you know. I think it's very challenging to try to outguess the trends and be the hot topic of the day. So go with what you feel, what's authentic for you.
And I think to add to that, if you try to follow the trends and it's not really who you are, I think people can tell that. I think people can tell right away the authenticity of things.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to pick on an artist here that I am fond of, Tommy Lee, the drummer of Motley Crue.
Yes.
When rap metal was the big thing, he put out a rap metal album. Then when Creed was the big thing, he put out a Creed album.
Who, Tommy Lee?
Yeah, you don't remember that?
No, but I love Tommy Lee.
Okay, we'll talk after the show about that.
I love Tommy Lee.
Well, Frank, thank you. Thank you. So, go on.
I got you guys all choked up.
Frank, I wanted to say and mention that on your website, you work with different people. You work with production companies, and you do music licensing, correct?
Yes, we work with across a group of different great producers. We live in Los Angeles here, where we're fortunate to have folks like Alex Wand, who I mentioned, Grammy winner. We work with, we had over here just a couple days ago, Scott Page, who played sax with Pink Floyd. Tomorrow I'm recording Billy Hinchy. He played with Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys traveling band for 30 years.
Wow.
And he's playing on a track we're doing. So we're fortunate to have a lot of talented people right down the street. And so that's one of the good things about being where we are.
That's very, very excellent. Your links, all your links, and you have some pretty cool music videos. Those will be up as links as well.
All the links in the description.
Yep. And Frank, I just want to say thank you. And I don't know, I'll throw this out there to you, and you don't have to say yes or no right now. But we would love to have you guys come on and talk to you guys about suicide prevention and about what you're trying to do after you get your video done, and we just love to have you back on and talk a little bit more, because I think this is, especially in the creative community, I think is the most not the most, but I mean, being creative is hard, and having a creative outlet.
The odds are way against you from the standpoint of making money from it, or even paying the rent. So that's one of the real big challenges. I mean, the music business is tough. And,
yes.
Well, yeah, we'd love to let us get that done, and we can talk more
Yeah, we'll totally
Absolutely.
start the email chain.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
geez, guys, this has been great. Obviously, you really connect with your audience. They just love you because you're right on the same wavelength with them. And I appreciate the authenticity, a word you used a moment ago. The authenticity of this whole discussion has been great.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. All of the podcasts we did in the past are up and running right now. We have no more banked-in shows. Everything we record will be up the following next 2 days, probably, depending how many times I've seen the new Halloween movie this week.
That's
But
right.
everyone, have an awesome, safe, and fantastic weekend.